Alrighty, hello and welcome everyone. My name is Can. I'm here with Linkso, and we have Master Gardener Leslie Muennemann presenting on composting and home composting in particular. So please feel free to type in all your questions via chat and we'll go ahead and address them towards the end of the talk. I know we've got 2 hours. We'll try to go slow and steady to answer any questions that you may have. And again, this class is being recorded, so it'll be available under Linkso's community resources page. We will go ahead and send you a PDF copy of the presentation after the class is done for those who attended today. Otherwise, look forward to the recordings afterwards. That's my little spiel. I'll turn it over to Leslie. Welcome, and the class is all yours.
Thank you. I'm pleased to teach this class. It's one of my favorite subjects. And just tell you a little bit about myself. I first became a master composter through the San Mateo County. Many counties in California, probably throughout the country, are promoting composting, and I'll explain why as I go. And then I became a master gardener. And I want you to notice that on this front page, my name is highlighted. And what that means is that if you click on it, my email is embedded in this presentation. And that's why I asked Khan to make sure that anyone who wants a copy of this, it's a PDF. So I took my PowerPoint and I converted it into a PDF, and that preserves all the embedded links. So anyone who wants one can request it either from me directly, and Khan said she's going to send these out to anyone who, I don't know if it registered or showed up, but either way, it's available so that you can go through and click on these links, because I've embedded a ton of information on the internet for you to learn more, and there is so much to learn. So I'm going to get started with the Master Gardener program. Is through the auspices of the University of California. So basically, they are taking our tax dollars and using them to train master gardeners in the state, and through each county has their own master gardener program. So we're San Mateo, San Francisco. And if you're in this county and you want to become a master gardener, look for our training classes. And it's the professors from the university. So it's like a college class, the training. And then our job is to go out and take that research that these professors have done at the university level and translate it into gardening information for the public. And we do things like we have a helpline in 3 different places. And then the helpline, you can do it online through email, you can do it by phone, you can go in person. They have a schedule. I think I have that on the last page. There are times that you can contact them. We have a school garden where the master gardeners go in and teach the parents and the staff how to set up a school garden. We don't do the work for you. We teach you how to do it. And then we also have demonstration and research gardens. We have one in Half Moon Bay, Redwood City, a few others. San Carlos has a fabulous native plant demonstration garden right next to the city library. So we do this and we manage these gardens, and we use them as educational tools. And then we used to do the Maker Fair. I guess that's gone now. So the county fair, we do that every year. We put on a display, we have a booth and we have a display and with a theme, and it's to educate the public and to let people know that this is a free resource, a gardening resource in your community, your tax dollars at work. We are volunteers, but we're doing this through the University of California. And we teach classes like the one I'm teaching right now. So as you see, this up above the UC Master Gardener program is linked. It's got a highlight. And if you clicked on that, it will take you to our website. All right. So There is a new law in the state of California that requires us all to separate any organic material in our garbage. And, you know, this takes some thinking. You got to know what is organic and what, you know, and they have lists of things that you separate and things that you don't. So anything that will rot is considered organic. And the reason for this is because the landfill is expensive real estate and is getting full very fast because we are growing as a population and we are consuming and we are throwing out garbage. So they, even though you're paying for this, it's still, it's just diminishing returns here. It's just getting to be too much. And so they have to do something. And there's the climate change angle with the methane. This law will explain. I put a link in here so you can read about the new law. So it was passed in our state legislature in 2022. And I believe fines don't start until 2024. So right now they're not, there's no consequence if you're still putting your organic waste into your garbage, into your black bin. And what they want us to do is to learn to, before we put it in the garbage, to think about, okay, is this something that will decompose? And if it is, we have two choices. We can either collect it and put it into the green bin, which is the compost, that's the for the green waste, and that's where your kitchen scraps and any paper that's soiled with food would go in, like a pizza box would go into your green bin instead of your black bin. And so this is just a habit that we all need to be mindful of because it affects all of us. I mean, if we ran out of landfill, they're going to have to buy more real estate, and then our garbage bills are going to go up. So it behooves all of us to be mindful of this. And it may take some time if you're not doing this now to stop and think before you dump something, and to set up and I'm going to show you how to do this in a home. With us, it's been something that we've done for years and years and years, and the kids grew up with it. So we're all very used to, you know, we Thursday is when the garbage gets picked up. We all know we have 3 bins. We know where everything goes, and we, you know, it's just become part of our life. And this is what we all need to do. So compost is basically a natural occurrence. It happens in nature. When the leaves fall off the trees onto the ground, when animals die and they decompose into the soil, anything that's alive is organic and is going to, when it dies, it rots, and that's the decomposition process, and that's what composting is. So we're taking something that happens naturally in our around us, and we are manipulating it. So we're taking it, people have done this many times, have learned the optimal way to get organic material to break down. And you get the results of what Mother Nature does naturally. You can create leaf mold, which is just rotted leaves, or you can put all your kitchen scraps in with leaves and other browns, and it will turn into compost eventually. So this class is going to teach you the basics of what compost is and how to make it. It's not hard. You need to start thinking, you know, about nature and soil and gardening. Just put your gardening hat on, and it will come very naturally because it just totally makes sense that this is the way things happen. Now, compost is not a fertilizer. It's often referred to as a fertilizer. It does have fertility because whatever the components of that decomposition were originally, leaves, kitchen scraps, manure, whatever it was, the green and the brown that you put in originally, that has some nutritional value. So when that decomposes, that nutrition remains in that compost. So it will give your plants a little boost when you apply it to your soil, because it does have a little bit of nitrogen if you used a lot of greens in there. Any plants, for instance, when we grow a cover crop of fava beans are notorious for nitrogen. And so when they get decomposed, all that nitrogen goes into the compost. So it's for fertilizer, it's, I think, a legal term. It's the NPK that you see on a bag when you go to the nursery and you want to buy fertilizer. It'll tell you what the nitrogen percentage is, what the phosphorus and the potassium percentages are. And compost, if you buy a bag of compost, you will not see the NPK on it, because legally, I believe, they cannot do that, because it's not it's an amendment. And what that means is that it will help condition your soil. And as I go, you're going to understand exactly why it conditions your soil. It adds to your soil. It makes it a better soil. So basically, we were just learning to do what Mother Nature does naturally. We're manipulating all the ingredients and speeding up the process. Mother Nature does it very slowly, usually, and we can speed that up considerably. Now, the benefit of compost is that it will condition your soil. So it will take clay, soil, and it will add organic material to it, which is broken down to decomposed leaves and kitchen scraps, and it will loosen it up. It'll make it just nice and crumbly and easier to work. And the roots of your plants can move through that soil more easily, and there's more moisture, there's more oxygen in the soil. It just makes your soil so much better. Now, again, I highlighted certain words, and if you click on those, they will take you to a website that will give you a ton of information about that particular subject. So it'll describe friable soil, it'll describe leaf mold. So in my neighborhood, we have a lot of oak trees, and we don't have sidewalks, and we're county, San Mateo County, so we don't get street sweepers or anything. So those leaves just sit there unless somebody moves them, and they just decompose. So we have decades of leaves falling and just piling up, and eventually they decompose. And it's leaf mold. That's basically what leaf mold is. It's decomposed leaves. It doesn't have soil in it. It may have a little dust that blew into it and stuff, and garbage that blows around, but it's basically decomposed leaves. And it's free. I mean, walk around your neighborhood and look for sources of leaf mold. You can create it by composting leaves yourself. And I think I embedded a video on that subject, so you can learn how to do that, or you can just find it and dig into it and see how wonderful it is. All right, so the benefits. Again, all these words are highlighted, and if you click on them, they will take you to more information. So the benefits are many, and I started to allude to them. So it will condition your soil. It's an amendment, so it makes good soil, or clay-y soil, or whatever kind of soil you have, it will make it better, because the compost, the decomposed organic material, it actually opens up the soil, so it creates pockets where water can get through, and the roots also need oxygen, and it can retain water, so it helps with drainage and it helps with water retention, which seems contradictory, but it does that because it's like the decomposed organic material is like a sponge. So imagine that you take a sponge, a dry sponge, and you get it wet and you squeeze it. There's still moisture in that sponge. It's not dripping wet, but there is still moisture in it. And that's exactly what compost does. It retains that little bit of moisture in it, And if you have plenty of organic material in there, you've got plenty of moisture retained in that soil. So it just gives you a hedge in case your soil dries out. Now, you keep kitchen scraps and you want to keep disease-free yard waste on site. That's what the counties want us to do. They want us to stop dumping our garbage in the landfill. And so if you keep a bucket and keep your kitchen scraps in the bucket and then keep a compost bin or some way of retaining the yard waste that you accumulate, like your grass clippings, if you prune a tree, those prunings, if you sweep up your leaves, put them in a pile, all that stuff, they want you to keep it on site. And you only keep what's disease-free. If you have any problems in your yard where something's not healthy, that you would definitely get rid of. You put that in the green bin. You would not keep that on site. This is going to add up to less garbage collection and eventually less cost to us. As I point out here, if you've gone to the Ox Mountain dump off of Highway 92, which I believe is where they dump all our garbage for this area, it's about $42 for a cubic yard. Now, a cubic yard may sound like a lot, but it is quite a small amount of material. So it's quite expensive to use the dump, and we're paying for our garbage, and it just adds up. And then eventually, I mean, there are, like I say, the climate change, that angle too, the methane, we want to reduce methane. But for us as gardeners, there are many benefits to keeping our kitchen scraps, to keeping our yard waste. It's a different lifestyle. You have to be involved with your garden and you have to feel comfortable with decomposition to a certain degree, but it's not yucky. I promise you, it is just, to me at least, it is so interesting. I just love to do composting. Now, as I mentioned, it helps with drainage. All that organic material acts as a sponge in your soil, and it improves the structure and the permeability. Permeability is the percolation of water through your soil. And if you have clay soil, as I'll explain later, clay is very fine. Imagine flour. Imagine that you just have flour and you add water to flour and it's going to make a paste. Well, a clay soil is like that. It's very fine particles. But if you put bigger particles, which is the organic material in your soil, you're spreading out that fine particle, you're adding a bigger particle to it. So you're going to open up spaces in your soil. And that's what the soil structure is. You can't alter the texture of your soil, but you can alter the structure, and by adding more organic material. Now, the texture, I've had for years had trouble getting these two separated. Texture is like, the texture of my hair is fine. That's never going to change. So the texture of your soil is never going to change. You're going to have, you were created, your space on earth was created with so much silt, so much clay, and so much sand. And that texture in your soil is permanent, but you can change the structure by adding the organic material. You can improve on that soil texture and make your soil more amenable to plants, to gardening. Like I said, the roots need to go through that soil. They need moisture, they need oxygen, and you create that by adding organic material to your soil, improving your soil. Now, you can get free compost from the county. And this link, I believe, will take you to places where they give away compost. And basically what that is the green bins that we all contribute to our garbage, that gets composted somewhere. I don't know if it's San Carlos or where they do it, but they compost our yard clippings and presumably our kitchen waste if we separate that and put it in the green bin. And you can get that for free. The problem is that you don't know what people put in their green bins. They could have put, diseased plants in, and I've done that. I mean, where else are you going to put it? You have to put it in the green bin. I'm not going to put it in my compost. So that's the difficulty. Even if they make their compost hot and kill anything, any pathogens in that compost, we're relying on what other people have done. So be cautious. Look at the compost, try it on on a few plants and see if they do okay. If they do, then it's probably fine to put all over your garden. But there is free compost. All right, the benefits, let's see here. All right, so the components of ideal soil. So as I mentioned, you have a texture, which you cannot change, and you have the structure. And the texture are how much clay, how much silt, and how much sand you have in your soil. And in California, we tend to have high clay soil. And what that looks like in practice is that when that soil gets wet, it puddles, the water puddles. It doesn't percolate easily because there are so many tiny particles in there. If you had sandy soil, predominantly sand, it would percolate rapidly. And silty soil, it percolates kind of in the middle there. But clay soil is, you've seen that when you've gone out and you see a rut that a tire's made in the soil and there's a puddle of water and it's just sitting there. That's clay. And when that clay soil dries, it is hard as a rock. And when you dig in your garden and you're hitting something hard, it's probably that was clay soil that got wet and then dried out and now it's hard. Just like my kids used to call it Indian clay. It's just clay in the soil. And you can do this experiment. It's a fun thing to do where you just take a sample of your soil and you put it in a jar, a glass jar, and you mix it with water, give it a nice shake, and then let it sit for 24 hours. And come back and you will see the levels, it will divide. The heaviest will be the sand, silt will be next, and then the clay is very light. It's the little particles, that'll be at the top, and then you'll have either water. The blue is the water, so you'll have water on top. And the organic material is the lightest, so it's going to float on top. And these percentages is what this website claims is ideal soil. So I put that in there and I put this link where you can go and read. He has a ton of information on how to improve your soil. And remember, it's the soil that leads to the healthy plants. So where we want to put all our attention is on making the soil in our gardens as healthy and as amenable to plants as possible. And consequently, we will have a very happy garden, very happy plants. So this is a fun experiment to do. Let's see. And this is, we have in our San Mateo, San Francisco County Master Gardener program, we have some people that specialize on improving soil. And they've produced this slide with lots of information in here on soil. Building your soil structure basically is adding more organic material, which you're going to learn how to make at home and then add it to your garden. And slowly but surely, this is going to take possibly years, depending on how much clay you have in your soil and how much area you want to improve. It takes years to start improving your soil. All right, so clay soil. As I mentioned before, clay is like flour, dry flour, that you bake with. You know how that you just blow it and it just blows off. It's so fine. And that is what dry clay is like. It's very, very small particles. And when it gets wet, it sticks together. And if you have clay soil on the left here, there's this, you can make a little ball of soil, get it so that you can squeeze it and see what it looks like. And that's, I believe, on this picture. In fact, all the pictures in this presentation, I have embedded a link to a website that will describe this process in more detail. So as you can see, he's squeezing it. It's holding together just like clay holds together. If it were sandy soil, it would fall apart. If it were silty, it would probably not stick together as well as it's sticking together in this picture. Another way to find out what kind of soil you have is to do the percolation test. And basically you dig a hole and you fill it with water, and then you let it drain, and then you come back and fill it again and you time it. And I believe there's a link in this picture that will take you to a website that explains in more detail, or there's a video embedded in here that explains in more detail how to do this test. If it takes a long time for that water to absorb into the surrounding soil in your garden, chances are you have high clay, and you would benefit from adding organic material into that soil to loosen it up, make it a little more fluffy, make it a little more to improve the drainage, and make it better for planting. As it is now, if it's clayey, what's going to happen is your plants will sit there and they will be either drowning in water, and that will kill them because they can't breathe, or they will be completely encased in clay and can't absorb any water. So it's a good thing to know what kind of soil you have in your garden. Another presentation of clay soil is that when it dries, it gets hard. And if you've ever had to go in and hit your soil with a pickaxe, it's probably you're dealing with soil that got wet and then got dry and now is hard as a rock. And another thing that will make it hard is if you have a garden and it gets wet and you walk on that soil. So that will cause it to compact, and that will make it hard even if it's not clay. So try to avoid walking on any wet soil in your garden. All right, so you need some tools to make compost. You need something to put your kitchen scraps in. And later on, I'll have a list of what things you can put in your compost and what things you can't put in your compost. But basically, it's any foods that you eat except meat products, like bones and grease, and there may be a few others. But so we put all our vegetable scraps go into our compost. If I blow my nose, that tissue goes in my bucket. My paper towels go in there. We put cardboard in the green bin, but if we need cardboard for composting, cardboard will degrade very easily. That doesn't go in our food scraps. Eggshells would go in there. So there's a long list of things that you can put in your kitchen scrap, and it doesn't have to be a fancy container, as I'll show you later what ours look like. It's just a bucket underneath your sink where you keep your cleaning supplies. That's kind of the arrangement we have. So it's handy whenever we're doing vegetables or doing any kind of cooking, and we have scraps that would break down in a compost bin. We put them in our bucket right underneath the sink. Now, the other thing you need is a place, a site to make your compost. And through trial and error, the people that have done compost have learned that the ideal size for home composting is 3 by 3 feet, so 3 cubic feet. So you need a 3 by 3 area, preferably dirt. And the reason is because the dirt has microorganisms in it that will mingle with the compost that's above the soil, and you have worms and all sorts of things in the soil. So, and it's just, it's easier, it's tidier in your yard to put it on soil. And we have it in the side yard. We have a bunch of bins there, and we move them occasionally, you know, to vary where the bins are, because they fertilize the soil underneath it too, or the compost contributes to the soil underneath it. You can locate a compost bin on concrete. You can do that, but you need to be realized that it will probably stain anything solid that's underneath there. So you would probably want to put several layers of cardboard and maybe plastic on top of that concrete before you build your compost pile on top of the concrete. So just keep that in mind. You need a minimum of 3 by 3 feet. Now, bigger, I've done piles, loose piles in my backyard where I just, you know, pile it up, piled it up, piled it up. And, you know, I'm not fanatic about timing. I just build it and forget about it and come back in a year, and usually it's compost. So it's a good idea, if you can, to have enough space so that, because most of us at some point need to turn the compost, or at least to sift the compost. So if you're trying to keep the temperature of your compost pile up, you need to move the compost from one place to another, or, you know, dump it into a wheelbarrow if worse comes to worse. But if you can come up with two side by side, 2 patches that are 3 by 3, you could either have a separate bin, and you can take the compost from one bin, turn it, toss it into the bin next to it, spray it with water if you need to. That's the ideal. That makes things easy. If you don't have a second bin, just a space where you can take the compost out of one bin and turn it and dump it on the ground. That would be the alternative. So you need space to be able to do this. Now, containers, there are many containers on the market, but you do not need to go out and buy a fancy composting bin. There's one that is my preference that I have, that I purchased through the County of San Mateo, which is the Smith and Hawkins bio bin, I think they called it. And there are people that have these that are not using them, that either give them away or sell them on Craigslist. And if you can get your hands on one of those Smith and Hawkins bio bins, I recommend you get it. I would pay up to $100 for one in good condition. It's in 3 tiers. It's plastic. All the sides come apart, and then they interlock. It's lightweight. It is incredibly durable. Mine are at least 20 years old, and they're still in pretty good shape. The only thing that's damaged them are rats chewing on the plastic, but otherwise they're still in very good shape. And they do the job, and they make composting easy. There are newer, they don't make the Smith and Hawkins anymore. That's why I say look on Craigslist. San Mateo County offers county residents a subsidy for their composting bins, and I think they only do it on a one-time basis. And it's very possible that this link, let me try it. This link takes you, yes, to the county website. So it's the county sustainability department. They take care of composting and waste management. So here they have, this page explains to you how you can get a subsidized bin. I think they'll a $65 discount, and you can get a composting bin, and I don't know if you can get a worm bin with that. You can buy a worm bin through them. That's a different kind of composting, but you can get a composting bin and some accessories they try to sell, and but you don't need to have this. It is convenient, it makes it easier, it makes your yard tidier, but there are many on the market. This one that we see here in the picture, I believe there's a little door at the bottom, and supposedly you go in there and you dig the bottom of the compost, and that's the composted material. Yeah, maybe that works. The way that I've done it here in my house is I've had the space, the 3x3 with another bin next to it. And when we go out and the compost has been there a year, usually within a year, even if you don't do anything, it's going to turn into compost. It's a natural process. It will decompose. So we go out there and we start putting the compost from the year-old bin into a screen, and we start sifting it, taking out all the big pieces, because it decomposes at different rates. So we try to get all the fine material out into a wheelbarrow, and then the chunkier stuff we put into a new bin that which is by its side, and we start a new composting bin that way. So that's been our procedure, and you're going to come up with your own. I'm just giving you ideas of ways you can do this. And as far as containers are concerned, you could use a garbage can for that matter. It does need to breathe. Otherwise, you're going to have garbage. It's going to smell like garbage. So you do need to put holes in that, whatever container you have, if it's solid. And it really does help it along if you're able to dump out whatever you put in there, mix it up, make sure it's wet, add fresh ingredients, and then put it back in the bin and let it sit for a while. So this is what we have in our kitchen. It's just a bucket. We don't have a lid on it. We don't have carbon, and it doesn't smell. I think that our garbage right next to it, where we put our meat packaging and other things that we do not put into our compost, that smells much worse than the bucket. So and it's very convenient. The sink's above, and whenever we're doing coffee or breakfast or dinner, and we've got vegetables or fruit, we put everything in there. Anything that will decompose that is allowed in composting, we put in there. All right, so there's some other tools that are very handy to have. A pitchfork, because even though I said that 1 cubic yard is not very big, 3 cubic yards is a substantial size, and it's going to be wet, so it's going to be heavy, and you're going to have maybe branches in there, and you're going to have it's going to be a lot of material that it gets to be work turning the compost pile. So a pitchfork is a good thing to have. You could use a shovel. It's not as easy to do with a shovel as it is with a pitchfork, because the pitchfork, you just stab it in there and lift it up and throw it into the bin on the other side. And, you get to observe, what kind of condition it's in. And, if you get a layer there and you decide it's dry, you take your little hose that's nearby and you spray it with a layer of water, and you keep tossing more and more in there. You're either turning it or you're sifting it, whatever you're doing. And I put in this long stem thermometer. Is very helpful to have. And especially if you want to keep your compost hot and speed the process along, and make sure that you kill weed seeds and kill any pathogens in your compost, then a compost thermometer is very handy to have. They're not expensive. I put a link in here. I think it's a video that tells you how to use it. And you could use a kitchen food thermometer if you wanted to, an old one that you want to dedicate to your compost. It will tell you what temperature it is. I don't know if it'll go up to get as hot, but maybe it would. But the point is that there is an ideal temperature for for the weed seeds to be killed and the pathogens to die. So if hot composting is your goal, then a thermometer is, you'd need to have one. You might be able to tell that it's hot, and usually you can just by putting your hand on the compost, because it gets pretty hot when it's hot. And but just for learning, just to learn how to do this, it is a good thing to have a compost thermometer. I've used my compost thermometer now, and I put it in the garden to test the soil temperature, because I'm learning that soil temperature is important for, you know, some plants like hot soil and some plants like cool soil. So I've been using it there too. Now you need a screen because the compost is not all fine. You put different size material in there, and it's going to break down at different levels. So some of it will not be recognizable. Most of the soft, watery stuff like the vegetables skins, those won't be recognizable. They'll be completely decomposed. Eggshells take forever to decompose. They'll be maybe ground up in there, but you're going to see eggshells. Avocado pits take forever to decompose. So you're going to sift and take out those chunkier parts. You can put them in your soil. There's nothing against it. I just happen to like nice, fine, finished compost. That's just my preference. It's beautiful stuff. And so I put in here how to make a screen. We have one very similar to this. It fits over our wheelbarrow, and we just go in with a pitchfork and pull out the compost from the bin, toss it into the screen, give the screen a nice shake, and that's how we sift our compost. But there are other ways to do it. You could do it with an old colander, you know, you could do that. There are so many ways to do these things, but this is our way of doing it. And we've been doing this for over 20 years, and my kids now do it, and it's easy, and it's just a way of life. Now, ingredients, this is important. So there are all sorts of formulas for what goes into a compost. But basically what Mother Nature does is she takes the browns, which are high in carbon, and those are usually dry leaves. So we have a lot of oak leaves in our neighborhood, and we use those as a carbon. But you could use cardboard, you could use wood chips, you could use untreated sawdust. Newspaper is considered a brown, and today newspaper is printed with soybean ink, so it is perfectly safe to put into your compost and to use, you know, for other things, you know, like worm bins and things like that. Now, if you're going to do straw, you want to make sure that you don't use hay. I believe hay is the one that has seeds, and straw is the one that doesn't. So you don't want to use, I mean, I put weeds into my compost, so I am adding weed seeds to my compost, and those weed seeds get scattered all over my garden, and we have volunteers all over the place. That's just, we put up with it. But unless you want hay growing in your garden, be mindful about what you're putting in as a brown. And then the other ingredient is greens, which is the nitrogen. So it's a combination of carbon and nitrogen. And then you need the water and the air. Those are the 4 ingredients for making compost. And this is what Mother Nature, the leaves fall down, they fall on the soil, and they mix with anything that's green. You know, some of the leaves are still green, some of the leaves are dry. They get mixed up in there and they start to decompose. This is just what happens naturally. So we're taking those steps and manipulating them. And there are formulas. I believe it's 1 to 30 you have 1 part green to 30 part brown. And I believe I put in links in here that explain these ratios. And in fact, I think I put a calculator in. So you can plug in what ingredient you're adding to your compost and figure out how much of that you need to get the right ratio that's going to cause that heating up. You want to have enough green in there and brown in your compost pile, and you need it to be a certain size, that 3 cubic feet. That's the ideal size and the ideal ratio. And what happens is that in the center of that compost pile, all the microbes start breaking things down. And the way our compost teacher explained it to us, it's imagine you're in the exercise studio and you have all these bodies and everybody's exercising. Eventually that room gets really hot. And that's what happens in the middle of the compost pile. There are microbes that are multiplying, and they are consuming each other, and they're pooping in there, and they're breaking down the leaves and the brown and the greens, and that's the decomposition process. That's what's happening in your compost pile. So I will later on talk about troubleshooting, what you do if it's too cold, what you do if it's too hot, but these are the key ingredients that you need. And so if you place a compost pile somewhere in your yard, make sure that you have a hose or that you have some way of bringing water to your compost pile, because moisture is one of the ingredients that you need. You need to keep a certain amount, not so soggy that there's no air in there, because that would drown the microbes, but you do need to have a certain amount of moisture in there. It's supposed to be like a wrung out sponge. And then you need it to have, you don't want it to be so compact. Remember when I talked about the clay, where the particles are so small, they stick together. You don't want it to be so compact that there's no air in there. Because what happens in a garbage can, the reasons garbage cans smell so bad is because there's no oxygen in there. The bucket is open, the bucket under my sink where I put my food scraps, there's oxygen in there. So as we're piling up our kitchen scraps in our bucket, they're starting the composting process. So that's aerobic, and it tends to not smell. There may be a little smell, but it's nothing like a garbage can. Garbage cans smell bad because there's no air in there. And plus you put meat and other things in your garbage that contribute to the smell. All right, so the ideal temperature is 140 degrees. And I have been able to get my compost pile to that temperature in the beginning, when everything's nice and fresh, the leaves are nice and dry, the green, grass clippings are wonderful. They're loaded with nitrogen, so and mixed in there. And those, I had the mass, the 3x3, and so that was enough to get the decomposition process to begin and to heat up the pile and start it going. All right, let's see here. So here's a chart that tells you what you can put in your compost pile and what you can't put in your compost pile. Now, for instance, you would think that office paper, just the paper we use in our printers and stuff, would be okay. It will decompose, but remember that paper has been treated with chemicals. So if you're a purist, you probably would not want to put office paper into your, but like I said, newspaper now is made with wood pulp and soy-based inks. So it is not toxic. And wood chips, any kind of wood that you put in, make sure that wood has not been treated. Do not put fence posts, that wood that's been treated so it doesn't rot. Those have been impregnated with chemicals. So they're not a good thing. Now, it says here cotton fabric. I have put little pieces of wool yarn in mine, and they take forever to decompose. So they will eventually, but when you sift your compost, you're going to see those things are going to be left behind. You can put them back in or toss them, but let's see here. And then nitrogen, there are so many things out there that are loaded with nitrogen. We now ask our neighbor for all the grass clippings. We had been putting them in our compost. Now we're using his grass clippings as mulch in our vegetable garden because it does such a good job. But you know, if you don't have these yourself, you could ask your friends to save them for you. I used to do dumpster diving. I'd go to the grocery stores and I'd pull out all their, like during the corn season, I'd go in and help myself to all the corn husks that got dumped in the dumpster. You know, there are many ways to find these ingredients if you need them. All right, so the things to not put into your compost pile. So if you do not want weeds to propagate in your garden, be mindful that when you weed your garden, if those weeds have seeds on them, put them in the green bin. Don't put them in your compost pile because they will just create more weeds. And we have not been real meticulous about this, and you know, we just deal with it. Occasionally we do pay attention and say, "Ooh, there are a lot of seeds on these weeds," so we put them in the green bin. You don't want any diseased vegetation. So, you know, if you've noticed that some of your plants, mildew is not really a problem. But if you have a fungal disease, you know, that's your tree limbs are dying, or, you know, put those in the green bin. Don't put them in your compost pile, because most likely, if you did put them in your compost pile, that's going to remain in there unless you get really, really hot, and you might spread that disease. Don't put anything oily like salad dressing. Leave out all meat. Too much dairy. I have put a little bit of dairy in, you know, but don't overdo it with the dairy. Certainly do not put bones in there, because you will attract every kind of wild animal you can imagine. They will smell it and they will come and they will chew and try to get into your compost pile. Just it makes for a rather disgusting. It will probably look more like a garbage can if you put those things in. So avoid those things. Horse manure, I put an asterisk there because I'm not sure about. I understand that horses are dewormed. They're given medicine to kill the worms in their system, and that may affect plants. So I'm not sure about horse manure in my compost. So I try to talk to wherever I'm getting the horse manure. If I go to a farm and they're willing to let me dig it up, and I find out how they've been treating their horses and all that information. You would not want to put feces in, any kind of feces of a meat-eating animal, cats, dogs. You can use your like if you have a pet rat or you have a hamster, those kinds of animals, they're not meat eating. Those rabbits, all that stuff, that's good actually. They're bedding, they're when you clean out their cages, that's good stuff. Like I said, treated wood, charcoal briquettes, I believe, because they are impregnated with chemicals, and too much of anything. You don't want to put too much. We had a plum tree and it was just too much, and we took all that fruit and put it in. It acidifies. It creates a problem in your bin. So don't put too much of anything in there. I mean, if you put too much brown or too much green, that's a different problem. But as far as the ingredients, the main ingredients, don't put too much of anything. If you put too much brown in, it wouldn't do anything if you didn't have green in it. You have to have enough greens in there and enough moisture for the combustion to start, the decomposition process to start. So if you had too much cardboard, yeah, you probably would have, nothing would happen. If you had too much green, you would have a very hot compost pile. All right, so once you've got your ingredients in your compost bin, you need to stir it up, kind of mix it. If you don't mix it, it will still decompose. It may not decompose evenly, but it's a good idea, at least when you're starting your compost pile, to follow the steps, you know, to get the right amount of greens, the right amount of browns, and make sure they're moist and that there's some airspace in there, that they're not packed in tight in that compost bin. And that and the sooner you can fill up that 3x3, that's the ideal size to get the decomposition started. All right, so here's a calculator that I mentioned. You can, I think if you pull these links down, it'll show you how, yeah, you put in here whatever it is that you want to add to your compost pile. And you can play with this calculator. It is very entertaining. And for people that like to do the math part, this is highly informational. And I think I did it once, and I'm not good at this, so, but it did look interesting. All right, particle size. So I mentioned that depending on what size the components are in your compost bin is going to dictate how fast they decompose. And the smaller the particle size or the ingredient size, the faster. Because what's happening is the microbes they're not eating it. They're just breaking down the outside and all the components of the leaf. They're working on it. And so that's why the smaller the particle in your compost bin, the faster it's going to break down. And this graph, basically, somebody did a test and they figured out that, as you can see, the temperature goes up faster if it's small, and it takes a lot less time for it to decompose. So it took, if it was 1 inch in diameter, it could get hotter faster, and it would decompose and become finished compost sooner than if you had big chunks in there. So if you had the 6-inch diameter, the bigger one, it doesn't get as hot because those microbes take a long time to break down the outside of the surface of those objects. So the more surface there is in there to break down, the easier it is for the microbes to get to them. And it's going to get hotter and you'll have compost sooner. So be mindful of what size some people take their prunings, for instance, and cut them into little small chunks. If you have the patience to do that, then, you're probably going to get compost a lot faster. Now, somebody they wanted to find out, temperature, how turning your compost affected your temperature. This graph shows you different times. So they did it in 5 days. 5 days after starting their compost bin, they filled it up. They came in and they turned it. So they probably got their pitchfork, they pulled out the compost, put it into a bin next to it, or the wheelbarrow or the ground, wherever you're going to put your turned compost. And then they built it back up again, made sure that it was moist, and so the temperature goes down when you disturb your compost pile by turning it. But it exposes a lot more ingredients to those microbes. So eventually it's going to heat up again. And that's what this graph is showing you, is that the temperature will go up, then you turn it, it goes down for a little while, and then it goes up again. And as time goes by and there's less and less of the original ingredients in there, if you keep adding to your compost pile as you're turning it, you're going to affect the temperature. So if you add more greens, say your neighbor gave you a bunch of grass clippings, throw those in when you turn your compost, and you're going to notice that it's going to get hotter, most likely. If all the conditions are right, it will probably heat it up a little bit. So you can do that. That's perfectly fine. But eventually when your compost is finished, there's no temperature. It's cool. It's just, there's no temperature to it. And that's usually how you find out, the decomposed organic material is not recognizable and there's no temperature to it, and it smells like a forest, then you know it's finished and it's time to sift it. All right. So this is my teacher. She was employed by San Mateo County to teach composting. And she had a business in her backyard in San Mateo where she made compost tea. So she made a lot of compost, and then she sent it to a lab and they tested it for, you know, she wanted to make sure there was a lot of microbes in her compost. And then she put it in a container and she, you know, made tea out of it and sold it. So this was a business she had. So she obviously had a lot of compost bins in the backyard. And this must have been winter time. And it was cold outside, and she's digging in her hot compost, and this is what it looks like. And you know, when you put your hand in there, it's hot. It feels hot. All right. So the soil food web is a good thing to know, because basically our soil is alive. Our soil contains a lot of life in it, mostly bacteria. It has fungi in it. It has bugs, insects, and they all, you know, need each other because they all eat each other, and they poop in the soil, and they contribute to all the original material that was decomposing gets treated through their bodies and turned into the decomposed organic material. So that's what the food web is. There's a link in this graphic that will take you to a website where you can learn more about the food web. Now, this is an important thing to know about, because a lot of us do compost and then we go in there and we want to turn it, and it looks like somebody dumped a bunch of ashes in it. And that's actually a good sign. That is a bacteria. Well, it's either a bacteria or fungi. I don't think they've made up their mind yet, but it's basically part of the process of decomposition. And this is what it looks like as that process is taking place. And I believe it is at a certain temperature. I don't know what that temperature is, but if you turn your compost and you find a lot of white stuff in there, sometimes in soil, you can dig in your garden and you'll find a lot of white stuff like that. That just basically means is that there was organic material in there that hadn't finished breaking down and was breaking down in your soil, but here it's in a compost pile. So this link and the photo will take you to two places where you can learn more about this particular phase in your composting experience. Now, as I mentioned, finished compost doesn't look anything like the original material. You may feel a few leaves in there, you know, usually eggshells, a few things are still in there. If it was a big chunk, it's probably not going to be broken down. It won't look so much like itself, but it's not going to be broken down. But most of the juicy stuff that you put in, soft stuff, small stuff, is going to be broken down and you won't recognize it. It'll be fine. You can sift it and you'll get nice crumbly. It's not soil, it's organic material. It may look like soil. It's dark and it smells wonderful. And so we usually do with a screen like this, and it just lives next to our compost pile with our wheelbarrow. But like I said, you could find different ways to sift it, or you could just use it straight. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with putting chunks of not yet decomposed material into your soil. They will decompose eventually. And as I explained earlier, it will loosen up your clay soil. It will improve drainage, but it will also retain moisture in the soil and open up the soil so your plant roots can breathe and everything will be healthier and happier. So troubleshooting. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you need oxygen to compost. And if you take out that part of the process, you end up with an anaerobic compost. It will compost, but this is what our garbage cans do. There is no oxygen in there. We put a lid on and there are no holes in the container. So all that garbage sits there in the heat. It's juicy and all, but it's breaking down, but it doesn't have the oxygen not smell. So it's going to smell like a garbage can. And if your compost pile starts smelling like garbage, that means it has gone anaerobic. That means you need to turn it, and you need to turn it more often, and make sure that it's not too wet. Make sure that you have enough browns in it. You probably wouldn't want to add greens. You might want, add more browns, I would say. Often this happens if it gets too wet, or if you've added too many greens and they're not breaking down properly. But that's one problem that people have. Now, if your compost goes over 140 degrees, that's usually a wonderful experience. It doesn't last very long because all those greens in there, the nitrogen is going to get broken down very fast. And a lot of us like to keep it high. And the only way to do that is keep adding greens, not brown, more greens probably, and keeping the thermometer in there to make sure. And the temperature is in the middle. It's not on the edges. It's in the middle of the compost pile. Remember, you needed 3 by 3 cubic yards, a block, and in the middle of that block is where the most of the temperature is happening. So if you goes over 140 and that's or higher, you need to turn it to bring more air in, and you also need to add more browns. More greens would help that temperature spike. So you put in more greens. And you can give it a spray of water. It might be dry, so spray it, and that will cool it. Just the fact that you're turning it. Remember, I showed you that graph of temperatures. Just the fact that you're turning it is going to cool it. Now, if it doesn't get to 140, that usually means that you need more greens, more kitchen scraps, more grass clippings, more fresh leaves, smaller particles. Make sure that everything's cut small. And that's going to make it go faster. Remember, we saw that thing about particle size. The smaller the particles, the more surface the microbes have to break down that material, and temperature is going to go up. So if it's dry or compacted, so it will compost, but it's going to go very slowly. And we often build the compost pile, do all the steps that I described to you, and then forget about it for a year. We come back in a year. We may add to it, as our kitchen scraps. We take our buckets and bring them out to the compost, and just, because they shrink as they decompose, the pile will shrink. So there's more room in the bin. So you just make a little hole in the compost pile and bury your kitchen scraps, and then cover it up with leaves or more, the decomposed compost. You don't want to leave any kitchen scraps exposed, because the rats and all the wildlife can smell that, and they will come. I promise you, because we've had that problem before. So make sure that if you add to your compost, especially kitchen scraps, bury them in your compost. So if it's dry or compacted and there's no heat, and you want it to change it, then you need to turn it and add air and add moisture, and maybe some more greens. Now, I put in a ton of information at the end. That's why I really want you to get this PDF, because you're going to get so much information. And if you're like me and you enjoy learning about this stuff, I have some very fun places on the internet you can go to and learn about composting, and learn about soil, and learn about gardening. So this is all interconnected. So remember that the compost is an amendment that you add to your soil, you improve your soil, and if you have healthy, beautiful, luscious, permeable soil, your plants are going to be so happy, and they're going to reward you. So this is all interconnected. So any of these are links. They're highlighted. They're links. You can go and read about these things. A lot of them are universities, or there are government agencies. Some of them are YouTube people that I've watched regularly and I trust, and they know what they're talking about. And here are my references. For the most part, this is what I use to make my presentation. So you can click here and learn more about why the state of California wants you to keep your organic waste on site, to either put it in your compost bin, that's the preferred, or to separate it from the garbage that goes to the landfill and put it in your green bin. So you could do it either way. You know, compost, like I say, I'm partial to that, and it's very beneficial. But you know, you can also separate it and put it into the green bin. We're all paying for this, we might as well use it, right? All right, so I have ways that you can use it. This gardener is using it as a mulch, or they also call it top dressing. And so you can either mix it into your soil, or you just put it on top, and eventually, you know, with time and you know, it's going to move, all the microorganisms are going to work their way down into your soil. So you're going to get the benefit of that. And I want to thank Linkso very much for inviting me to give this presentation. Again, my email is embedded in this link here. If any of you have questions or just want to talk composting, share stories, please, by all means, contact me. And thank you. So
Alrighty.
I'm available for questions.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. You know, we only had one question mentioned in the chat, and then you ended up answering that. So let me see here. Unless, okay, so here's one that just came in. This person made 6 bins of compost, but they're finding it tough. The redwood trees, they have found their compost bins as far as 15 feet away, and they sent feeder roots into them. And when they go to harvest, it's mostly redwood tree feeder roots. They're wondering what they can do about this.
Well, it sounds like it's too close to that tree. So that is a problem. If you put your bin on soil, you got to make sure that you know what's around it, because things will grow into it. You know, we have ivy on the neighbor side, their ivy will grow into our bin. So they probably either need to put a barrier underneath their bin, you know, put layers of cardboard, or you could even put stepping stones underneath it, some sort of barrier, so that those roots can't, you know, they're going to go there because, you know, that's good stuff. But either move it or put a barrier. That's what I would do.
Okay, thank you. You know, I'm going to resurface this question again, but I know you mentioned this in your talk, but the ratio of the browns versus greens, is that by volume, weight, or something else? If you can just...
I'm not sure exactly how they do it. That calculator will probably explain it better, or the link that talks about ratios will probably explain it better. Let's see if I can go back to that. And the way we do it is we do it by, we just have containers, and, you know, 1 to 3, you know, 1 to 3. So we put in 3 containers of leaves, 1 container of greens. So it's basically more browns than greens, and we're not real sticklers about it. Of course, if you do it properly, let's see here if we have ratio ingredients. No, they okay. I probably have one embedded in here. Ingredients. Let's see if this one has the carbon. Yeah, so this will talk about carbon to nitrogen ratio. At least, yeah, it will talk about it. So let's see. So most things have a lot of carbon, and 30-to-1 is the ideal. And the closest to that would probably be horse manure. So horse manure has 25. Leaves are really high, dry leaves are high in carbon. So you get twice as much. You probably would want to put 2 of the kitchen scraps to 1. And I don't know whether they're doing it by weight or how they're doing it. We would do it by container, because that's what we had. So, we did it by 1 to 3. So 1 to 30. I mean, we're not going to put 30 containers in there, but you kind of, you just kind of visualize in your compost pile. Okay, I've got more browns in there than I have greens. And then you use your thermometer, and if it goes to 140 in 24 hours, then you've got the right ratio. If it takes a week to go up to 140, then you probably need more greens. So that's how we would do it. But like I say, if you read this article that was in this graphic on the presentation, see this graphic, it's embedded in this graphic, and it will tell you what the ratios are. It'll explain it better than I'm doing.
All righty, great, thank you. So yeah, the presentation will be emailed out along with the link to the recording here. So look forward to that. So you can click on all these links, and it's also shared via chat today. That's pretty much all the questions we have. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, we've got another one here. What can be added to speed up the compost process? They've tried the UC Berkeley 2-week method, but haven't had much success. Can compost tea be added to a compost bin to speed up a compost pile?
What was the second part of it? The UC Berkeley, and what was the other one?
I think I haven't heard of it, but it's a UC Berkeley 2-week method. Must be some sort
What
of
was
a composting.
the second thing? They tried 2 things?
No, they just tried that one.
Okay.
They
I'm not
want to know.
familiar with that. So what my experience has been with composting is it's whatever green you use, the green is what's gonna start that firing up the oven. So for instance, if you used alfalfa meal, so that's basically dry alfalfa that's been ground, or alfalfa. The pellets probably wouldn't be a good thing because they're little granules. But so if you use like alfalfa meal, which is I think it's an amendment, it's a fertilizer, but that is really high in nitrogen. So I've done that. I've sprinkled that just because I was curious to see what would happen. And yep, that really warmed up that compost pile. Grass clippings, if you really want to be see what happens, take your grass clippings, put them in a blender, create some sort of slurry, throw that in. Remember, you created a smaller surface. That slurry is going to get attacked by those microbes, and that's going to start that process of decomposition. So that would heat it up. So put in smaller greens. That's how you get it hot faster.
Okay. And then do you want to address the compost tea comment? Can that be added to the compost bin?
The compost
Tea?
Spell it for me.
Like tea, like, coffee, tea, compost tea?
Oh, okay. If you make compost tea?
Yes.
I wouldn't, I mean, that stuff is expensive and hard to make. So if you're going to make compost tea, you usually add that to your soil. You don't add it to your compost. The compost tea is basically you're taking the essence of your compost ingredient, the composted material, and you're just bringing out the good stuff and putting it in a liquid form, and then you feed your plants. You water your plants with that. Or you use it as some people use it as a foliar spray. They put it in a sprayer and they spray it on their trees and stuff.
Okay, all righty, thank you. What about coffee grounds? Can that be considered as green?
I believe so. And we're big coffee drinkers, so we add a lot of coffee grounds to our little bucket. Yes, you can. They will decompose.
Can you overdo coffee grounds in your compost? Can that make it acidic or, throw off the pH balance?
I mean, it depends. I mean, if you go like to one of the businesses that make coffee and you get a, truckload of that stuff, if it's a huge percentage of your greens, it might create a problem. It would probably do a pH thing, and it may be toxic to your plants to have too much of that in there. So I would err on, being moderation with what you put in there. I mean, for instance, I put in a lot of corn husks. That was fine because they're all going to break down, and they were big, and there's a lot of surface there. So percentage wise, if we weighed them compared to the other things I put in the compost, they probably weren't the biggest part. They just took up a lot of space.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about active versus passive composting?
Active is when you want to keep the heat up. So active means you have to participate. You have to keep an eye on it, have a thermometer in the middle. And as soon as the temperature starts going down, you turn it. And one thing I didn't mention is when you turn it, usually if you're going to do it in the bin, not remove it, you're doing it from the outside or from the center or the outside. Anyway, you want to get all the outside part of the bin to the middle. So you're just kind of reversing places. So the part that hasn't been exposed to the center, you want that in the center. So we just take it out and turn it and then get it wet and put it back in. So if you want to get it, if you want it an active pile, you have to participate. You have to keep the heat up. If it's passive, you do what we do. You build it and you forget about it, and it makes itself. It just takes longer. And sometimes parts of it, don't compost, but they get sifted out and thrown in the next bin.
So if you are composting outdoors, can the weather affect your composting process? Example, heavy rains versus, hot summer days and drought season.
If it's covered, and most of the bins have covers, and it's a good idea to keep it covered, the rain won't get in. There have been times when we've left the lids off and they get rained on, so consequently it gets saturated. But because we put in larger size, we've never had a problem where it's gotten so soggy that it's created a problem. It just it's going to take a while to dry out before you can't really sift wet compost. And then the lids are good because you don't want wildlife getting in there. And as far as temperature, I don't believe that makes a difference, really. The climate, it's the rain does make a difference.
Okay. Pretty much all the questions for this afternoon. Do you have any closing statements that you want to share with everybody?
I hope you all try composting. It is, like I said, it's fun and it's not that hard. And if you're into gardening, you're going to realize that this is just part of nature, and it's when I started taking this class and learning about this, I didn't major in science. So science is kind of novel to me. And it's quite interesting. There's a lot of science. And it's definitely the future. So I think we should all get on board and start keeping our compostables, our organic material on site and learning to use them.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Leslie. This was a wonderful presentation and it'll be available under our community resources page. Thanks again for doing this for us.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks,
bye, everybody.